Booby traps and danger around every bend. With Nate and his dad, the adventure never ends. From the pyramids to the deepest jungle green, lost cities of gold, sights unseen, dusty tombs and treasures that gleam. They're living the life like an 80s dream alive. Hey now, Nate, let's start the engine. Chasing relics, father, son stride. Hey now, Nate, ancient legends, globetrot myths, let's take that ride. Incan temples, desert sands, cryptic clues in foreign lands.
On day 3 of our trip, the second full day in Jordan, we were once again traveling with Alex. We would visit 4 locations, starting with el-Jimal. Founded by the Nabateans sometime in the 1st century CE, el-Jimal's original name, along with the name it had under the Romans later, is lost to time. Its current name, which translates to Mother of Camels, was given to it by the Bedouins who sheltered their calves in its ruins during the 1,000 years it sat abandoned after earthquakes in the 8th century CE dealt a final, if not immediate, death blow. We began our exploration in what has come to be called the Barracks, a small 5th century CE fort or castellum.
Ooh, this is a whole room.
I definitely want to go check out.
Oh. This is sick, dude. Dang, there's more room back here, but it's all collapsed in.
Bummer.
Yeah, maybe we can get around to it from the other side. No, not really.
Nope. Well, this takes us out of the barracks, though.
Oh yeah?
Oh, this one had a proper door as well.
Yep.
Yeah, waterfall of the barracks.
Oof.
Yeah.
I definitely want to go exploring more though.
Yeah, inside?
Yeah. Here, you stay here. Ah. In here. Through here. Wow. Found it though. Took me a second to get around. Dang, you can see the rest of them here. Broken
but
right off.
How are you supposed to get through it? Once you got to the top.
Maybe these ones originally came out farther?
Doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like they're broken.
Maybe it was like originally a staircase and then they put the walkway up there?
Maybe.
Oh, wow.
What do you see?
I see a space big enough for me to fit.
I can do it.
Wish me luck.
Good luck.
You think I should go feet first or head first?
I just be careful on the camera.
Yeah.
Head first, I would say, but you know, it's your call.
If this goes properly, it'll be a hell of a shot.
I'll try and follow you in with the camera.
Shit, I gotta be careful with the camera. That's a hell of a shot. It's pretty cool. Coming back. Oh yeah. Whew. This is nice sand.
The barracks was built about 100 years after the town's original, much larger castellum, probably to house the military unit that replaced the original garrison as Roman imperial policy shifted to entrust allied tribal groups more with frontier security and defense. Modifications to the barracks continued into the 7th century CE, with some of the last additions being towers on the west and southeast sides. More minor modifications to some of the rooms around the courtyard were made by French troops, who briefly camped here during the First World War. The southeast tower is 6 stories high and offers quite a dramatic view from inside, though probably not in the way you might think. All the floors are gone, and only a few corbels and steps remain. In the 5th and 6th centuries, during the Byzantine period, at least 16 churches were built at el-Jimal. The larger, more elaborate public churches were built at the periphery, while several were built into private areas. Such was the case with the double church, which in antiquity could only be entered through the courtyard of House 103. Not knowing any better, we accessed the courtyard through the ruins of House 104. As often happened on this trip, we were not prepared for what we would see inside the double church.
Oh boy. Holy shit. I mean,
I'm gonna step on it.
whew. That is a thing, buddy. Holy crap.
As the name implies, the double church consists of two very similar churches sharing a center wall. The original mosaic tile floor of the southern twin can still be seen and appreciated today. Every one of the extant 150 houses, 16 churches, and dozen or so public and military buildings at el-Jimal was constructed of cut basalt blocks, and they were experts at it. They knew that the material could support a maximum length of 3 meters for a structural beam. They used tricks and techniques like the lintel relieving and double corbelling seen here at the entrance to the courtyard of House 16 to produce impressive multi-story structures. Because we don't know the town's ancient name, we can't rely on any literary sources for knowledge of what went on here. Everything we know has been learned through archaeology and the general historical context of the region. Various inscriptions found throughout the site in Nabatean, Greek, and Latin give tantalizing nuggets of information. This is the sacred stone which Masik, son of Awida, made for Dushara. This is the stela of Fear, son of Shule, the tutor of Gadima, the king of the Tanuk. A name here, a year there, personal, intimate. Some of the houses we explored were massive, elaborate, some small, modest. All were beautiful in their way. el-Jimal was not famous. It was not a playground for the ultra-wealthy. These were normal working-class people living the best life they could. You might think that its ruined condition and endless piles of dark stone blocks would impart a depressing feeling, but we found quite the opposite impression in its winding streets and quirky irregular buildings. el-Jimal is charming, beguiling even. We were scheduled to spend only an hour and a half exploring. We exceeded that by an hour, but in the end, all we knew for sure was that to explore the town to our satisfaction would require 2 or 3 solid days. We resolved to return at some point in the future and continued on to our next destination. Our next stop was Qasr Deir Al Kahaf, a name probably acquired through successive uses of the site. Castle, monastery of cave, or caves. The original small Roman fort, which makes up the southeast quarter of the current structure, dates to around 210 CE, when a road was built connecting the Azraq oasis to the Roman settlement of Imten, now in Syria. It was one of at least 2 outposts built along the new route. That road would later be incorporated into the Strada Diocletiana around the time the fort was expanded to its more or less current form in 306 CE. The final major repairs and expansions done by Rome were completed between 367 and 375 CE. The fort was used until the mid-6th century, at which point it was abandoned and reused by a monastic community who built a chapel in the center of the courtyard. The fort was briefly reused once more by the Umayyads in the 8th century CE, probably as part of an agricultural estate. For Nate and I, each of these Roman frontier forts has its own fascinating character and quirks to discover. We will never get tired of exploring them.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Wait, give it a couple more seconds. Ooh, a single red rock. Handsome.
Try as I might, I could find essentially no information on Qasr Deir al-Kinn. The name suggests it was a monastery at some point, but I could find no reference to that either. What remain on the site today are a very ruined rectangular Roman fort, most of its building material having long since been repurposed elsewhere, a couple of kilometers of canals, and the largest Roman reservoir I've yet seen. The Roman reservoir at Dayr Al Kinn is almost the size of the fort itself. We took one last good look around and continued on our way. The main attraction of today's journey is the town of Jawa. The site consists of an upper town, complete with city walls that still stand as high as 6 meters, a lower town with its own protective walls, and a complex system of canals, diversions, water storage, and dams to capture and hold the winter flash floods. There was no other source of water for Jawa. They had to catch a year's worth of water in the winter as it sporadically roared down the Wadi Regil from the north. All of this may start to sound kind of standard for the ancient sites we visit, but there are some very special things about Jawa. For one thing, this town rose and fell more than 5,000 years ago. That's before the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was already abandoned more than 3,000 years before the first tomb was carved at Petra. Let that sink in for a second. We entered through the best preserved of the upper town's many gates and walked roughly the course of the ring road for the first half of our visit. Jawa is the least visited of any site we've been to, owing partly to its remoteness, partly to the condition of the site after so long, but mostly to the fact that very few people, even in Jordan, seem to know it exists. Alex, who again no longer lives in Jordan, offered the only tour of Jawa I was able to find, and he said that he only typically got enough inquiries to run the tour 5 or 6 times a year. To be fair, given the ubiquitousness of more visually stunning ruins throughout Jordan, it's understandable on a purely aesthetic level that Jawa hasn't garnered more attention. Other than the upper town's remaining city walls, it does require a close inspection to realize the enormity of what you're seeing. Every little rock on the 100,000 square meter site is an artifact. Every one was once part of a home or a workshop or all the things it takes to keep thousands of people fed and safe. The drama and power of the place comes from letting yourself open up to just how special its story is. Jawa was a fortified town of between 3,000 and 5,000 people at its height. It was hastily constructed sometime between 3,500 and 3,400 BCE. In the prehistoric period between the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, known variably as the Eneolithic or Chalcolithic or simply the Copper Age. That makes Jawa the oldest proto-city in Jordan. Also, Jawa's masonry gravity dams have been recognized as some of the oldest extant dams in the world, and certainly the oldest of their size, with the largest being over 260 feet wide and employing some engineering principles that were lost along with Jawa and only reinvented in modern times. From what excavations have been able to determine, the town was built quickly, by persons unknown as not a single burial has been found, and occupied for perhaps as little as 50 years before disaster struck. We know they were attacked, more than once, either by an external foe or an internal struggle between the upper and lower parts of town. Whoever remained afterward didn't stay long, as crude attempts to maintain and expand the complex water system failed. The site then sat empty for 1,000 years before a small section was briefly reoccupied as a caravanserai in the Middle Bronze Age. And that's it. For 4,000 years since then, Jawa has been empty. The local Bedouins knew of it, of course, but it wasn't discovered by archaeologists until an aerial photograph was taken in 1931. Even then, it was misidentified as a Roman fort, and nobody paid enough attention to understand what it really was until 1950. Some excavations took place between 1972 and 1976, and the story began to be coaxed from the stones. Still, nearly everything known about Jawa was written by Sven Helms, the leader of those excavations. There's been no major work there in the nearly 50 years since, so no opportunity to employ new technologies and techniques for interpreting the site. There's so much left to learn here. Jawa is nearly unique among sites this old, in that the original prehistoric town remains completely on the surface. It's never been buried. It doesn't have millennia of new construction layered atop the old. We walked through its 5,000-year-old gates and wandered its original streets. How incredible is that? We know almost nothing of the people who lived and died in Jawa. Without a single skeleton, we have no way to tell where they came from or where they went to. We don't know if their children simply went back to being nomads after this experiment of community failed, or if their lines were ended here with an abruptness they never could have imagined. But everywhere, we see the evidence that they existed. Evidence that in a mad display of optimism, they tried to create something from nothing. And for a while, they succeeded. But I suppose you could say that about any civilization. For a while, they succeeded.